This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, and we take a look at the political pieces we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 8th day of October 2020, and I am DM.
I'm JM.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, UHURU fires warning shot to halt rebellion. In the Standard, taming RUTO. And in the Star, why state wants to stop DP RUTO hustler campaign. Can we begin here, please, in the Star?
Yeah. Let's begin with the Star. Now, the head of public service yesterday held a press conference at Harambee House to just reiterate the rules, the law, the orders which the government is expected and law enforcement agencies are expected to enforce. People like NCIC, the Inspector General of Police. And he quoted extensively the Public Order Act and reminded politicians that they're subject to the Public Order Act. I'll just read very briefly some provisions of it. And Section 5 talks about the regulation of public meetings and processions. And it says, any person intending to convene a public meeting or a public procession shall notify the regulating officer of such intent at least 3 days, but not more than 14 days before the proposed date of the public meeting. He reiterated that yesterday. And one more thing. Section 5(6) says, where the regulating officer notifies the organizer of a public meeting or a public procession that it is not possible to hold the proposed meeting or procession, such public meeting or procession shall not be held on that date. So basically just reading the right act, calling politicians to order, reminding them that there are laws and these laws will be enforced.
Immediately.
Yes, absolutely. Immediately.
Wow. So we will have a 3-part criteria that we will use to break down the headlines. We will ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? It hits the mark on being topical. Whether it is groundbreaking, I am not sure. But can we do the Standard and the Nation together? Why are we taming RUTO?
I think the Standard has focused on the RUTO part of Kenyua's announcement or the directive that he delivered yesterday. And of course they're pointing that it follows the chaos that happened in Murang'a, but that also Kenyua said that some individuals are taking advantage of the vulnerabilities in our population occasioned by the socio-economic shocks of COVID-19. So like riling up those that are lower down in the socio-economic scale, and saying that also youths are being radicalized politically, so this will lead to tensions. But then also the Standard pointed out that the deputy president is set to go to Nyamira. I think that is tomorrow. And after the directive was issued by Kenyua, a representative of the deputy president on Twitter still said that the deputy president will go to Nyamira, will have a meeting with the hustlers in their towns, markets and villages. So it's obviously in the time that Kenya made the directive and the time that it was announced that the DP will still go to Nyamira, of course these the outlines of the requirements that Kenya based on the Public Act, Public Order Act, had of course not been fulfilled. So it is saying whether you have given that directive or not, this is going to happen. I mean, for this I would just say, you'd never pick a battle that you're sure you're not going to win. And
I do like that NSAC has said that politicians will be held, those at the highest level will be held responsible for any action. So that for me holds some gravity. In the Daily Nation, pretty much the same story. UHURU has fired the warning shot. He's saying, people better shape up. And these tough rules hopefully will set the tone for the campaign period moving forward. I also like that UHURU has said, let us take this to the Lord in prayer. And I like that he said, this weekend, this country needs divine intervention. People need to get it together, but also prayer must be followed by purposeful action. And so hopefully these guidelines and rules will put people in check and in place.
What I would say to the DP's camp, I think it would be wise at this point to stand down, because going to Nyamira after this directive has been issued, it is definite that there's going to be a clash. Because based on what Kenyua has said, if the direction is not followed, or if there isn't permission or whatever else that he said, then the security forces are going to hunker down on on the meetings.
Yeah,
so
and it's interesting. Yeah,
I have a slightly different view. I think the state is actually the one that should back down to some extent.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. The only way to defeat an idea is not to counter it head on, it's to introduce a better idea.
Okay.
So trying to confront the hustler narrative head on ain't gonna work. And that's what we saw in Moranga on Sunday. This thing has acquired a life of its own. And so how do you kill it? You introduce a better idea, something bigger, better than the hustler narrative. And the hustler narrative is really, it's a weak one, and so if we can poke at that and introduce a better narrative, that'll be a better way to kill this whole hustler debate.
Interesting. I like that. I was going to say Murkomen pointed out that the greatest threat to our national security is not social media or political gatherings. It is deceit, wrangles and fights at the highest level of government and the governing party. So fighting words there. And it seems like DP side isn't backing down on this one. Let's see how it goes in the next few days. Who do we give our winning headline?
I like the taming RUTO.
Yeah?
But I also do like the warning shot.
To halt rebellion.
Yes.
I like the Daily Nation as well. Gives us food for thought
Daily
and a call to action.
Yeah.
There you have it. Daily Nation gives us our winning headline. On to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? Can we begin with the star?
Yeah, so here we have a cartoon of CS Magoha in an empty classroom telling students they can come in. However, the students can't enter as the door is closed. It only has tiny spaces for them to pass through, as you can see there. And on the board is written 2020 curriculum. The rest is blank.
And Magoha is like hiding in the corner there, almost not sure.
It looks like he's expecting a rush, a stampede into the classroom.
But the door is not fully open. It's like little windows there. I mean, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
I like it. Humorous.
Yes.
Can we move to the Standard?
The Standard, we're still on Magoha, and he has a large megaphone, and his mouth looks just as large. So he's appearing to yell, and in the background, looking at him, are some public healthcare workers and some teachers. And I think the relevance around this cartoon is that there will be no mandatory testing for the teachers who will be returning to school, especially given the rapid rise in COVID-19 cases in the rural counties. So the teachers union yesterday was urging the government to release the school calendar, and Belio Kipsang said reopening plans were progressing well, but the ministry could not supply the test kits. You know, I was been looking at this story and thinking, you know, Nigerian scientists have invented a test that costs less than $1 and takes half the time to get the results. So perhaps we should be looking to Nigeria to import those or something.
Interesting.
And perhaps I just thought that Magoha should probably look at what Tanzania is doing. Tanzania, I think,
is Tanzania doing anything?
Life seems to have gone back to normal. Well, it has really never been disrupted by COVID. And maybe that could be used as a test case to see how we can to inject a bit more confidence as we reopen schools.
Magoha hasn't really inspired confidence.
He hasn't inspired
He's been
confidence.
very confusing.
He hasn't.
If we move to Daily Nation, also Magoha related, there's a caricature of him there, and he's holding a test tube. So the first test tube actually is one of RUTO with a microphone and Raila in one. And they look like they're deep in campaign. And then the second test tube is of an archbishop, so there with the churches and the coronavirus mixed up in there. And the third looks like revelers, average Kenyans sort of having a drink, having a good time.
A dance.
And a dance. And the one he's holding has students, and he says, no need to postpone this experiment now. And I'm guessing it's because we've had a series of lockdowns and secessions and whatnot. It started with no political rallies, then that was lifted. Then it became, churches were limited in who they could have, and then they were, opened up. Bars were closed, now they're opened up, and now it's the turn for schools and students. I quite like the Daily Nation cartoon, guys.
Yeah, it's quite good. I do want to say that people need to cut Magoha some slack. He's in a situation where he has to be extremely decisive, and he has to be decisive immediately. I know he hasn't inspired confidence because he seemed to be flip-flopping. But I'm just looking at the decisions that he has made right now, and they're actually informed. They're informed decisions. They're informed by the deliberations. They're also informed by the curriculum. And, you know, since we are phasing into a new curriculum, that is why the grade 4 kids are going back to school. So it's a situation where he's damned if he is, he does, some damned if he doesn't. But as a leader, he should just do.
Can we give the Daily Nation our winning cartoon?
I think so.
With the test tube?
Yes.
There you have it. Daily Nation gives us our winning cartoon. And now for our final thought. But before we get there, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now our final thought. It's inspired by the book How Democracies Die and How We Can Save Ours by Stephen Levinsky and Daniel Ziblatt. So of course the ours in the title of the book refers to America. It's the American authors. So the book examines the fundamental principles of democracy and looks at some historical cases, and they draw particularly from Latin America, where democracies or states that were previously democratic have turned into dictatorships and autocracies. And the authors also examine how these democratic downfalls have happened, whether it can happen again in the future, and what could be done to prevent this dangerous decline in America and also elsewhere. So being American, as I've mentioned, they make a lot of references to Donald Trump's presidency, and they determine whether Donald Trump actually qualifies for an American autocrat, which is against the long democratic history of their republic. So Trump, they say, has challenged a lot of norms of presidential behavior, how a president should look like, how a president should talk, or how a president should behave. Some people like it. They say that it is a breath of fresh air and it is good to see something and somebody different. But the authors investigate how this unpresidential behavior of Trump has been seen in other parts of the world, and those are the specific things that led those countries into a sharp, undemocratic decline. So they say that if democracy is to remain healthy and functioning, it will take an adherence to certain rules as well as a pro-democratic code of conduct. And one of those things that they offer, and they call gatekeepers in the book, are political parties. So of course in America, the political parties, the two main political parties, have a long history. And they said that it is a tried and tested method of ensuring that extremists don't come into power. However, in this case of Donald Trump, that didn't quite work. But then the thing that they pointed to the parties not working, or working as efficient gatekeepers for democracy, is because behaviors that normalize extremism or that justify extremism were not avoided in the early stages or in the early stages of Donald Trump's campaign. And he compares this to 1930s Germany, where the German Conservative Party allowed Hitler supporters to hold joint rallies with them. And then when they realized that this is a slippery slope, it was too late. The idea or the thought had already taken root. And he also makes reference to Venezuela, where the same happened. The former President Caldera also sympathized with Chavez's anti-democratic acts. And then, of course, it deteriorated into an autocratic stronghold, or regime.
The other thing that keep democracies in check or prevent autocracy is the unwritten rules. And what the author says is an adherence to the unwritten rules is important. And this is about two things in particular. First, mutual toleration and institutional forbearance. He says mutual toleration means that participants of a democratic system treat their political rivals as legitimate contenders with an equal right to power. They are, in a sense, the government in waiting, not as enemies, traitors, or criminals. Institutional forbearance, on the other hand, means refraining from actions that would undermine the spirit of democracy, even if the act is technically legal or not prohibited by the Constitution. And he gives an example of George Washington as president. When he was president, there were no term limits, but he exercised forbearance by only serving 2 terms. And so until Franklin Delano Roosevelt, every single president did only 2 terms. And that was not against the law. Now, Roosevelt did 4 terms. And it's actually after Roosevelt served as president and passed on that they proposed the 22nd Amendment to officially set the term limit to 2 4-year terms.
So FDR had overstayed his welcome.
Yes, absolutely. But he justified it on grounds of necessity.
Yeah.
So mutual toleration and institutional forbearance, he tells us, are closely linked. Yeah. And when one isn't followed, the other will often suffer, therefore putting democracy at risk. And he gives us an example in Chile during the 1960s, where mutual toleration began to erode as the political rift between the left and the right grew more intense. The left accused the right of being old-fashioned and out of date, while the right accused the left of trying to take over power. President Salvador Allende, a Marxist from the left, threatened the use of executive powers to get his agenda through parliament, where the right-wing majority were determined to stop him. And eventually those tensions reached a boiling point in August of '73 when the Chamber of Deputies declared the government unconstitutional, and a month later a military coup was held by the right-wingers, resulting in Allende's suicide. And then Chile fell into a glorious dictatorship under Augusto Pinochet. Finally, let me just bring this home, mutual toleration. I think in 2007 we experienced a total collapse of mutual toleration, and that's what led to the post-election violence. In 2017, we must also admit that we got to that point, especially following the protracted legal battles between NASA and the government and tear gas Mondays since January of that year. Mutual toleration also reached a breaking point when Moraga nullified the election of August 8th and subsequently attempted to indefinitely postpone the repeat election of October 26th. And once again, what NSAC is telling us is that our political class is taking the country to dangerous levels of intolerance with the hustler narrative. So we've got to watch out for, we've got to be mindful to make sure that we are mutually tolerant of each other. And that we have that institutional forbearance as well. And I'm hoping that the BBI report will also be a cure to these issues. Should it
ever surface?
Yes.
So interestingly, in chapter 8 of the book, Levitsky takes us through the Donald Trump presidency when they talk about strategies in which authoritarians seek to consolidate power. And he sees that Trump has attempted all 3 strategies, and these 3 are capturing the referees, sidelining key players, and rewriting the rules to tilt the playing field against opponents. Now, I'll just focus on capturing the referees. And by referees, he means sort of these key gatekeepers of these crucial institutions in America's republic. And so he tells us that a few months into Trump's presidency, he faced talks of impeachment, but he retained his support base, and he was able to do this by pandering sort of to the media and the public and to that support base. And he even claimed often that his administration was beset by powerful establishment forces, telling Americans that no politician in history, and I say this with great surety, has been treated worse or more unfairly. Does this sound like the deputy president currently? So let's talk about his assault on referees. So in trying to capture the referees, his first thing Trump was to do was to bastardize them. And he began with law enforcement, intelligence, ethics agencies, and the courts. So soon after his inauguration, he sought to ensure that the heads of U.S. intelligence agencies, including the FBI and the CIA, and the National Security Agency would be personally loyal to him. And he hoped that he could use these institutions to shield himself against certain investigations. For instance, the Russia campaign, the election manipulation and all that stuff. And so his first port of call was James Comey, the former FBI director. So everyone needs to watch the Comey Rule. It's a show on Showtime, which just outlines how Comey was really trying to defend the FBI from Trump and Trump's influence, and how he ended up having to lose his job, right? So they say that only once in FBI's 82-year history has the president fired the bureau's director before his 10-year term was up. But Comey would not relent. he really thought that he had to uphold FBI's sort of integrity away from and shield it away from Trump. Yeah, because Trump was like, I must punish and purge any agency that is not loyal to myself. So moving away from FBI, he then went to the Attorney General's office. There was a man named Sessions who he kept bastardizing in the press. And Trump would launch, these efforts to dig up dirt on everything about him and show conflict of interest just to try and bastardize the Attorney General. And this sort of worked. This attack on judges, attack on the judiciary. He even pardoned this Arizona sheriff called Joe Arpaio, who was convicted of violating a federal court order to stop racial profiling. And this just sort of shows you how Trump is willing to go to, even to such a small case, just to show loyalty to people who he thinks will support or pander to his support base. And this move reinforced to the public that the president would stop at nothing to pardon himself and those he felt were loyal to him. He even then went into, has been at loggerheads with the Office of Government Ethics, which is a key gatekeeper, they say, an independent watchdog agency that previous administrations have taken seriously, even though they have no legal teeth. But for Trump, he was like, this is nothing, and he constantly will bastardize this organization. So the book ends this chapter with sort of saying that although Trump assaulted these key referees, he didn't manage to fully capture them. And this is because, he, like when he tried to replace the FBI director, he wasn't replaced with a true loyalist. And this is because key Senate Republicans also vetoed this idea. They thought that the institutions must remain independent. And even efforts to replace Attorney General Sessions also failed in Trump's favor. So Trump then shifted to the media. And here he says in a tweet in February 2017, he says, the enemy of the American people is the media. And here we see how he constantly attacks the New York Times, CNN, and any other media platform that comes against him. And his whole thing is that Trump is mimicking the likes of Stalin and Mao, sort of that rhetoric. And he says in a tweet, I love the First Amendment. Nobody loves it better than me. Nobody. But as you saw throughout the entire campaign, and even now, the fake news doesn't tell the truth. I say it doesn't represent the people. It never will represent the people, and we're going to do something about it. So Trump has really successfully used the media, sort of like an African president, to his own advantage, and showing them that I can pander to my support base and get away with it.
A bad African president.
A bad African president.
Reading this book, I just thought, for somebody to bastardize democracy or roll back the gains of democracy, especially in a country that has such a long-standing history of being democratic, they have to be on a different level of shamelessness that only people like Trump can achieve.
Fantastic. So on a day where we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and a winning cartoon from the Daily Nation, I want to leave you with this. Sometimes by losing a battle, you find a new way to win the war. And that was said by Donald Trump. So I don't know what war he's trying to win, but eventually we'll get there. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on TV on GoTV, Prime Vita.